Hello investigators and welcome to Until the End of Time. My name is Veronica. Thank you so much for tuning in. In today's video we're going to be talking about Kymani Jones, the security expert. Kymani wasn't in the recent announcement article, but they are on the back of the box which was posted by Asmodee on their storefront. Before we get to this new investigator, I want to give a shout out to Frank from Drawn to the Flame, who has done the Herculean task of reaching out to various content creators to gather all the data that they have for content creator previews. And as you can see on the slide, there are a lot of these. There's a link to a document in the description. And if you go into the Discord, there's also something in the pins that actually automatically converts the release time to your time zone. So I found that to be very useful. So as you can see, we have a lot of previews yet to come. Preview season is going for another couple of months. There's a lot of excitement to go. And as part of that, we're going to be talking about one of the new investigators. I've already done videos on Carson, on Amina, and on the customizable keyword. So if you haven't seen those videos, go back and watch. And I also want to quickly mention leaks once more. I know I've done it in every one of the last videos and you're probably getting sick of it. But as you saw with the giant preview page, there's a lot more happening with preview season this time around. So leaks really do matter more now than they ever have. So please try not to leak anything. Thank you. I appreciate it. Now, before we talk about Kymani themselves, I want to talk quickly about their pronouns. Kymani uses they, them pronouns. And I think this is a great step FFG is taking to be more representative in the game. And it is just a great step forward. But I have also sadly seen some people online get upset about this, and I have also gotten some transphobic comments on recent videos, so I just wanted to take a moment here and say Arkham is for everyone. If you've been around the community for a while, then you've probably heard that saying before, and it is the idea that Arkham and the community are devoted to being inclusive, to valuing diversity, and not allowing harassment. Respect for fellow humans is an important part of keeping the community as great as it has been for years. And even if you personally don't care much for people declaring their pronouns, it makes a world of difference for them, and all we're asking is a little empathy and a little effort. No one is asking you to be perfect. Nobody's asking you to always get this right, to never make any mistakes. We're asking you to try, to make an effort, respect your fellow players, and be kind. If you don't think you can do that, get out. We don't want you here. You have no place in the community if you are trying to harass or discriminate. Okay, so now we can finally get to the reason we're all here. Kymani Jones, the security consultant. I've typed out their card box on the right here because the image quality isn't great. They are criminal traded. They have 3 willpower, which is quite high for a rogue. I believe only Jenny has the same. Let me just check my notes real quick. Jenny and then Sefna, right, Sefna has a higher willpower. Then we have 2 intellect and 2 combat, which is a little on the low side, and a 5 agility, which is only Winifred, Monterey Jack, and Rita. So this, to me, really stands out. This is an investigator that cares about their agility. They have a free trigger, engage an exhausted enemy. So the enemy has to already be exhausted. It doesn't just work on any enemy, but there's no limit there. As long as there are exhausted enemies for you to engage, you can keep doing this. And then they have a reaction, which is the meat of their ability. When you attempt to evade an exhausted, non-elite enemy, add your intellect to your skill value for this attempt. If you succeed by at least X, where X is the enemy's remaining health, discard it. So you can get rid of enemies in one shot by evading them twice. And then they have an Elder Sign effect, +1. If there is an exhausted enemy at your location, you automatically succeed instead. This doesn't belong to you. 8 health, 6 sanity. Kymani's ability let them deal with any non-elite enemy in 2 evade, which is very reminiscent of the Survivor card Waylay, and seems like just a powerful tool if you don't want to have to deal with ammo or weapons or anything like that running out, backstab. You can just get rid of enemies. Note that it is discarding, which is potentially a upside or downside. It means you won't be able to get victory points from enemies that you discard because you do not defeat them. But it does work on vengeance enemies in the Forgotten Age campaign to get rid of those snakes without having to kill them, which is quite nice. There are, of course, a bunch of ways to combo with this ability. One that's already caught a lot of people's eye is Stealth, level 3. This card from the Return to the Path of Carcosa. Return to the Path to Carcosa, wow, that's a mouthful. Is a upgraded version of a level 0 card, we'll mention in a bit, which has a free triggered ability during your turn, exhaust Stealth to evade. So you get a bonus evade using this free triggered ability rather than an action. The chosen enemy gets -2 evade for this evasion attempt. If you successfully evade that enemy, disengage with it, but do not exhaust it. Until the end of your turn, that enemy cannot engage you. Now, Stealth hasn't really found a home yet outside of like solo decks, I think, and even there it's been kind of a rarity. The main reason being that, you know, when you're trying to evade people, you're trying to get rid of them. But with Kymani, what you can do is evade them once normally, use your free triggered ability to engage them again, and then use Stealth level 3 to try to evade them again, so you don't have to spend another action. They get -2 evade, and assuming you succeed by enough to have that reaction ability discard them, you don't care about the rest of the text on this card. So that seems quite neat, and I think a common upgrade. Of course, it's worth mentioning with any deck that wants to evade lots, pickpocketing is going to be a heck of an engine. And I guess at this point it's worth mentioning that I haven't seen Kymani's deck building, so I don't know if they can even take pickpocketing or stealth. Like, they could have very odd deck building, but I'm just gonna be talking about rogue cards because that seems like a safe bet. And finally, it would seem wrong for me not to just mention Blur because it was my preview card. I really love Blur. I think it's got quite a home in the game, and I think getting additional actions so that you can then use your ability to discard them seems quite good. You're going to need some extra actions to really make the most out of that ability, I think, because spending 2 actions on a turn to get rid of an enemy is still quite a lot. We also are dealing with the fact that we have to succeed by X, and we are adding our agility and our intellect. Now, kind of curiously, their intellect is only 2, while their willpower is 3. So we're going to want to have allies like Lola Santiago to boost our intellect and our agility, which helps us succeed by X. There's also Gash, which just boosts all your stats by 1. There's some other drawbacks, but I'm sure you can play around that. And finally, I did want to mention Suggestion as being a way to add your willpower, which is higher than most rogues have it. And then if you combine Gash plus Suggestion, you are now testing willpower, intellect, and agility, which I think makes for a pretty neat little way to succeed by X. Of course, all of the usual rogues succeed by X caveats also apply, a bunch of skill cards, lucky cigarette case, you know, anything you want. I'm curious if people will be trying Haste in them. I think the problem here being that you want to evade twice, not thrice. And Haste's ability, once you do something 2 times, you can then do it another time, doesn't necessarily apply in this situation. However, there's a sneaky way to get around that. Using cards like Blur or level 0 Stealth, which has an action ability to evade, we can turn our evade actions to also be activate actions, at which point you could use something like a lockpicks or a flashlight as your bonus action from Haste. I'm not entirely sold, but the ability to get additional actions just is kind of powerful in general, and Kymani does seem like the investigator who will be doing the same thing twice a lot of the time, so I think it's worth considering if you can make Haste work. Maybe there's of course also cards in the upcoming expansion that will be actions to evade, which could make this even easier. Oh, right, guns. So I mentioned at the top that the nice thing about this ability is that you don't need guns for dealing with enemies, but there might be good arguments to use guns anyway. And the main one being victory point enemies and elite enemies, who are basically, I wouldn't say immune to Kymani's ability. Well, elite enemies are. Victory point enemies, you don't want to use Kymani's ability to defeat them, so you're going to need some other way of dealing with them. The standout to me is the 25 automatic. The ability to automatically fire one shot without spending an action after you evade an enemy seems like it would slip in nicely with this playstyle. And then you can use cards like Sharpshooter or Hard Knocks to boost your combat when necessary. The other thing about the 25 automatic is that it's potentially a way to reduce the difficulty for enemies that have a very high health value but relatively low fight value. Just by shooting them once, you get to reduce the difficulty you need to succeed by 2, by just putting a bullet in them and reducing their health by 2. Just a nifty little thing, and I think if you're playing it anyway because you want to have some answers to elite enemies, it's worth considering just firing off that shot just to reduce the difficulty of your test a little. Alright, well I do have 3 other previews. Now I want to be very clear right at the start here. I'm not saying any of these cards go in Kymani necessary, but we have only seen a single rogue card so far. I talked about it in a video way back, a link in the top right if you want to see it. And we just don't have a lot of other rogue cards to be talking about here, so I figured now would be a good time to quickly talk about the other 3 cards that have been previewed in the meantime. So at the end of this video I will be caught up, and as you saw in the in the slide at the very start, there won't be any more cards until the 15th, assuming that there's no surprise reveals, which should give me a couple of days to go without videos, and then you can expect a new video next week. First up, we have Orphic Theory, previewed by Reddit. This is a 1 XP Seeker asset that costs 2 resources, has an intellect icon, and takes up an arcane slot. It is a spell, but it uses for secrets and not charges, which slightly surprised me. And it has a free triggered ability: spend a secret, choose any non-weakness treachery not attached to an elite enemy. Until the end of the round, treat that card's printed text box as if it were blank except for traits. Now we've seen this kind of ability before on Alter Fate, where it just gets rid of a non-weakness treachery. Now keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a treachery that's already attached to something. The not attached to an elite enemy is just, it cannot be a treachery that is attached to an elite enemy, but it can be a treachery that's attached to something, or just one that's sitting in your threat area or something like that. And I think this ability is actually pretty strong. It's not game breaking, I think, but there's quite a few treacheries where if you just blank them for a round, that's effectively cancelling them. So I think this is a kind of narrower but reusable Ward of Protection style ability. Cards like Dissonant Voices do something for a single round, and so blanking them is effectively just just cancelling them. Important to note here that the timing works out that any at the end of the round triggers still happen even if you've blanked them until the end of the round. That's the timing of that works out well. But I'm also thinking of a couple of treacheries in Edge of the Earth which care about discovering clues from your location. Blanking that treachery for a single round, getting all the clues, and then getting out before the treachery regains its text box seems perfectly reasonable. I think this is a powerful card, and I think it's just worth including in most decks that can take it, but the arcane slot is no longer as free as it used to be, and you might be wanting to do other things with your cards, and I also don't think that it's a very permanent solution. I think this is the kind of Seeker-style approach to problems where the problem's going to come back at some point and you're not really like getting rid of it, but it'll hopefully leave you safe for a little bit, right? It's no Alter Fate. Next up, we have Heed the Dream, which is one of our new Dilemma cards. This card was previewed by Optimal Play, and it is quite the unusual one. So it is a survivor event for 2 XP that has no cost, no icons, the Augury and Dilemma traits, and reads max 2 dilemma per round. Revelation, reveal the top card from each investigator's deck and place them in a pile. Repeat this 2 more times. Choose one of the 3 piles. Each investigator draws each of their cards from that pile. Shuffle each weakness in each other pile into its owner's deck. Remove each other revealed card from the game. Now, dilemmas are the first time that we're seeing revelation cards on player-backed cards. Keep in mind, this isn't like the Stars Are Right, which is a bonded card that goes into the encounter deck. This is a card that goes into your deck and just happens whenever you draw it. So Maxine was nice enough to give us the ability text, or rather the rules text, that helps clarify this a bit. So you cannot play these cards. They just happen when you draw them. After they resolve their revelation effect, they are discarded. And they do not resolve during setup, but at the end of setup, if you've kept a card with a revelation ability, at the start of the first round, it will start happening. So what does actual Heed the Dream do? Well, it's kind of like a Eureka for the entire team. So when you draw this, you're going to set aside 3 cards, the top 3 cards of your deck in solo, and the top 3 cards of your deck and your other investigator's deck in multiplayer. And then you get to pick one of those piles. Everybody draws the cards from that pile, but then they lose the cards in the other piles for the rest of the game because they get removed from the game. They're not exiled, they don't get removed from your deck, but it potentially really messes you up when like you have a very important 5 XP like flamethrower in one of those piles, but you're really having to pick this different pile because it contains like a different card that you really need. So yeah, I'm super curious how good this card is in practice. I haven't had a chance to play it yet. It feels very risky and like weird, but I kind of love it, and it feels interesting. I'll give it that much, right? It's the kind of design where it's like I have no idea how good this is, but dang if it ain't interesting. One quick note: when a card with a revelation effect is added to your hand, it also triggers. So something like Resourceful could get back your Heat the Dream to trigger it again. I think Heat the Dream is best in 2 to 3 player count, maybe just 3 player count. I haven't quite figured out yet. So in solo, I think 2 XP to turn your draw into Eureka isn't worth it, because that's just pretty expensive. In 2 or 3 player, it's giving everybody else an extra draw, which is kind of nice. But of course, in 4 player, you run the risk that there's too many cards getting removed for the game. But I don't know. I think it's just very deck dependent. I think you don't want to build decks that are very reliant on like big 5 XP cards when you're playing this card. I think you want to have lots of like 2 and 3 XP cards that kind of do the same thing when combined, so that just the extra draw and the extra acceleration is really worth it. And I do just want to give a shout out. That's Ashcampede on the art with Duke, of course. And this is, I believe, Ashcampede's backstory. He gets prophetic visions about like bad stuff that's gonna happen and where he has to go to help people. So really love to see that like framed in this card art. Art is beautiful. Moving on, we have the Pocket Multi-Tool, previewed by Los Archivos de Arkham, which is a 3-cost customizable survivor asset. So it has no XP track like normal, and it has a wild icon. Takes up the hand slot. It has the item and tool traits. It is customizable, and it is also limit 1 per investigator. That's a line I missed like the first 5 times I read this card, but it is there. And then it has a very simple free triggered ability. During a skill test you're performing, you can exhaust the Pocket Multi-Tool to get +1 skill value for this test. And then it has one of the most on-point flavor texts so far yet. But wait, there's more. So the Pocket Multi-Tool at its base version kind of reminds me of the Ice Pick from Edge of the Earth, specifically Ice Pick level 1. Now, that costs 1 XP, but it is 1 cost and fast, and that gave you +1 skill value for a fight or evade. Sorry, fight or investigate. I think as it sits, 3 XP for an asset that takes up one of your slots that only gives you +1 once per round is a bit much to ask. Like that 3 resource cost is a lot. But fortunately, because it is customizable, we have some ways to get more value out of it. First up, we have Pry Bar. You get an additional +1 skill value if it's a skill test on a treachery. Sharpened Knife for 2. You get an additional skill value during an attack. Signal Mirror, +1 skill value during evasion attempts. And Magnifying Lens, +1 skill value during an investigation. These all seem like excellent boosts. I think the Pry Bar stands out the most for being only 1 XP and working on any treachery. This is a broad range of things that you can be boosting with these various upgrades. But I think, yeah, Pry Bar just helping with any treachery test seems fantastic. And the other one that stands out is the Magnifying Lens. Survivors historically have needed a bunch of different things to help them investigate. And this is potentially a pretty close comparison to lockpicks, where it's just +2 to investigate once per turn. You don't have to worry about any kind of supplies or the thing breaking. It's less of a boost than lockpicks gives, but, you know, I think that's a fair trade-off potentially. And of course, there are additional abilities on this thing. So we have the detachable ability. Other investigators at your location may use the ability on Pocket Multi-Tool. So for 1 XP, this is actually a pretty nifty little bonus. I don't think it's that good on its own, but combined with something like the Pry Bar, this suddenly turns into a support way to protect other people from treacheries. As long as you're at their location, you can exhaust this thing to give somebody +2 on any test on a treachery. That seems quite powerful already. Like that's potentially a card I would play in, 3 or 4 player multiplayer. And if I'm willing to spend a little bit more XP on the other modes, even in like solo, the ability to negate treacheries just by passing tests and not having to do anything like committing cards or spending resources, just play this down and you have a reliable boost seems quite good. Then we get the Lucky Charm upgrade. This costs 3 boxes, which is the equivalent of 3 XP. After you fail a skill test, ready the pocket multi-tool. Now this is reminding me a lot of a Live and Learn and just the Stella playstyle in general. It is very easy for survivors to set up intentionally failing for a benefit, for value, and this plays right into that. I can already imagine a Lucky Charm magnifying lens pry bar kind of situation where I'm playing a Stella. I use the pry bar during the Mythos phase to give myself +2 to pass a treachery test. I purposefully fail my first test on the turn with Take Heart in it, so I can draw cards, gain resources, and as Stella I get an action back. And then this readies and I can use the magnifying lens to then help me with an investigation. This seems like the kind of setup that I would often want to get, and it's only 6 XP, which sounds like a lot, but don't forget you get 2 copies of this for 6 XP, so it's kind of like a 3 XP card. And that seems quite good. I don't think, like, the thing is, failing skill test is going to happen, especially in Survivor, and getting additional value from that, the more you can pile into it, the better it feels. The one question I do have is what happens if I have the detachable upgrade and Lucky Charm? Do other people failing tests cause this thing to ready? Because I am not quite clear how that's supposed to work. And then finally we have the spring-loaded upgrade, which changes the free triggered ability into a reaction ability with the trigger when you would fail a skill test you are performing, exhaust bucket multi-tool, which turns this from a upfront boost to a reactive boost, basically a lucky style effect. This is a very powerful ability. This is an incredibly powerful ability. I think it doesn't combo well with Lucky Charm, or that's wrong. Like you'd rather have it boosting a bunch of different skill values. I don't want to spend 7 XP on spring-loaded Lucky Charm. That's what I'm trying to say. But the value to get a lucky on demand on any test you're performing or with detachable on any investigator at your location is very powerful. Comparing to Granny Orn, which is a 4-cost 3 XP asset that takes up the ally slot that can give you +1 skill value when you would fail a test, this seems like a powerful tool to have in the Survivor arsenal. And it's a nice little team supporting tool that also helps you. I had expected this card to be giving you some amount of compression, to be giving you additional clues or additional damage, and it hasn't done that, but it does do a lot of reliable skill boosting, which is a very Survivor thing to do, and I really like the design of this card. I think it is a simple yet elegant and powerful ability, and I think people will be trying this card in a lot of different decks. And that about does it. That's all the preview cards we have for now, but as you can see, there's lots more coming, so don't go away. Subscribe if you haven't. There won't be any more previews planned until July 15th, so hold on, we're coming. And hopefully I'll be seeing you when I'm doing my next video, which we'll be doing next week, because I have a very busy week ahead of me and there's no more new preview cards. So once we've seen a few more new cards, I will be doing another video. Don't forget to join the Discord, discord.gg/mythosbusters. Comments are always welcome. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you until the end of time.